Hello, Lost Woods Draft League viewers and players. My name's Jake, as you may know, Jack of Spadesman, coach of the Boston Blackjacks. We are going into week 3 of season 2 of the Lost Woods Draft League. This week I am up against the Sassy Sylveons, headed by Alec, aka I don't know her. And this team is one that I actually rated the highest in my season post draft tier list. It was the only other S tier I put along with myself. If that sounds conceited, sorry. Um, but yeah, Alec has a really, really strong team that boasts kind of like a tail room mode. Uh, Although, I mean, the Tailwind option isn't as strong in terms of like being able to set it up. You know, Thunderous doesn't get Prankster Tailwind like Tornadus does. Suicune gets it and Noctowl will get it, but they're not very fast, so it takes a little more setup on them. Um, as well, there's not some super fast attackers that take advantage of the Trick Room. Like, it would be a max speed Ursaluna or a high speed Sylveon, high speed Tyranitar. But then very fast Pokemon in Thunderous Incarnate and Ogerpon Hearthflame. Also, this is wrong. This 105 right here is a 110. Spoilers. Sorry, I was just looking. Yeah, this stat is wrong, so please ignore that. I think on my prep sheet it should be right. Yeah, on my prep sheet it's correct. Hisuian's Zoroark speed is 110, not 105. So it will speed tie the Ogerpon Hearthflame and underspeed the Thunderous Incarnate, but outspeed the rest of the team and speed tie this Ogerpon. So my build for this week kind of looks a bit different than my first 2 weeks, where Volcarona was one of the stars, but it does return to week 1 where Kommo-o is the star. If you look at this team, you know, the biggest threat is the Ursaluna. Everything's revolving around this Ursaluna for damage. You know, Thunderous can obviously do a lot of damage. Ogerpon can do a lot of damage. Tyranitar can do some solid damage. Suicune after setup, Toxicroak after setup, and Sylveon can naturally do a ton of damage, the mascot right there. So I opted to build primarily around an Iron Defense Body Press Kommo again. Let me actually look at the first draft of this team. Sorry. No, not that one. That one. Alright. So it's Choice Specs Hisuian Zoroark, which I just picked up in week 3 in exchange for Gengar. Even though Gengar did great, I wanted one extra point so that I could make a bigger move, which I'll talk about right now, which is going into week 4, I no longer have Oricorio Pom-Pom or Chestnut, and instead I have Raikou to have a 115 speed Pokemon, which is really, really nice. I don't have a flying type anymore, which is kind of a bummer, but I can work with it. I think Raikou is a very good pick for this team, complements the speeds very well, and can do a lot more than people would think, as well as having inner focus so I don't have to worry about fake outs, which are obviously always very good in VGC. So Hisuian Zoroark is here. I honestly didn't pick up for Illusion as much as I did just... If it didn't have Illusion, I'd be fine with that. But it's nice to have a real ability, unlike Gengar. I was just going with a fast Choice Specs Shadow Ball, Hyper Voice, Hyper Beam set, Terra Stellar to maintain its amazing defensive prowess and offensive prowess, and Trick, because there are quite a few Pokemon on Alec's team that really want their item, notably Ursaluna with Flame Orb and Porygon 2 with Eviolite, I would assume. The downside is I could accidentally give Choice Specs to something that would really like it, like Sylveon. Porygon 2 doesn't hate having Choice Specs. I can't trick Ogerpon. Thunderous wouldn't mind having it. Suicune and Polito, or not as much Toxicroak, wouldn't mind having it. So I considered not going to Specs, but I'll talk about that. Next, as I said, is the Kommo-o. Soundproof this week because I don't want to deal with Sylveon. I imagine that Alec is likely going to tech a either Moonblast or just a neutral Terra Blast and not Terra into Fairy, or have a Fairy Terra typing, such that um, that Pixelate boost I can hit Komo-o. So for that reason, I went with a Terra Poison. I was thinking about Terra Steel as well because naturally it's generally a better defensive typing. In this team, it certainly is fine. However, I really don't want to play around his Ogerpon Hearthflame getting crits with Ivy Cudgel. So I didn't opt for Steel, and the other option was Fire. But Suicune being a special attacker is not what I want to deal with. Obviously, I do have to play very well against Ursaluna's positioning, but I think once I'm +2, I shouldn't have to worry about getting KO there. I was thinking about Dragon Pulse. This was not actually the first draft. It was actually a thing I looked at later. And I did consider Dragon Pulse, but I will also discuss later why I did not go for it. Yeah, pretty standard Como here. Incineroar, the glue of the team. I opted for Covert Cloak this week, which is funny because, Incineroar uses Fake Out, but I didn't want to get faked out by Toxicroak. A big plan going into this week is leading Incineroar, not having to deal with Fake Out from Toxicroak, and being able to taunt Porygon 2, not let that setup go off, maybe taunt Thundurus. Being able to get off my taunts is important. So I opted for a knockoff Parting Shot, Fake Out, Taunt. Obviously, Fake Out, Parting Shot, Taunt, I don't have to explain. The option for knockoff is mostly if I can knock off this, and the Ursaluna or the Porygon 2, kind of like I mentioned with Zoroark, that would be very, very key. Overall, the dark damage really isn't doing much into Tyranitar or Toxicroak. It can't knock off Ogerpon's item. But I think the utility of it is really, really important, and Incineroar is there to be a utility mon. Clefable. Oh, I didn't mention the Terra. I went with Terra Grass because I want to be able to resist... Molly, you're sneezing. Molly the cat was sneezing. I want to resist Ursaluna's Headlong Rush. It could probably go for a Facade, but that wouldn't pick up a KO after an Intimidate. I considered Terra Bug, but I didn't want to also be weak to a Tyranitar Rock Slide. The reason I was considering Bug is because Toxicroak's fighting moves would be normally super effective, would be resisted. But I don't... I also want the electric resist that it provides from Thundurus, and just it's generally a better typing. I don't want to deal with taking super effective damage from crap I don't normally have to. I did consider it, though, to resist the fighting type and not be weak to Toxicroak's poison. Still on the fence about it. We'll see if it ends up being the right choice. Maybe Bug was the right choice, but I doubt I'm going to Terra Incineroar. If I'm doing a Terra in this game, it's almost always going to be Como-o. As I said, the game plan revolves around Como-o. So next we're going to Clefable, Terra Ghost, to avoid those pesky Facades from Ursaluna. And this week I actually went with Magic Guard, not necessarily because I want Magic Guard itself, but because I don't want Unaware. There's not a ton of setup on this team. There's Calm Mind in Sylveon, there's Download Porygon 2. There could be setup, but I don't imagine it coming, given I have Unaware. But primarily because, again, the big plan revolves around dealing with Ursaluna. And if I can intimidate Ursaluna, I don't want to ignore the drops I just put on it. So you might see my tech move this week. Moonblast, Follow Me, Life Dew, things I've been running all 3 weeks now. But I opted for Misty Terrain for a couple reasons. One, it means that Ursaluna cannot activate its Flame Orb. So, even if it goes for a Protect, I can set this up before it comes in. Bang, boom, no Flame Orb on the field. Next is if something like Thundurus wants to go for a Thunder Wave, if Toxicroak hits me with a Poison Jab, if Suicune hits me with a Scald, which I'm pretty sure it still gets, I don't want to deal with that status. That would be nice. There's no Dragon on this team, so it's not like I'm worried about Como taking Dragon damage, but that is the reason I did not opt for Dragon Pulse on Como, because it would have its output if I had to get Misty Terrain up, and Como wants to be on the field with Clefable, for sure. The next Pokemon I looked at was Blastoise. I was like, Blastoise I don't think is that bad this week. Finally. It can hit everything relatively neutrally except for Toxicroak and Suicune, and Cacturne, but I don't expect Cacturne to come. Big water spouts. I get a Shell Smash off. I'm probably going to outspeed everything. And then I opted for Terra Ground. That way I wouldn't have to deal with Thunderous's Wild Bolt Storm. And as well went with Earthquake for spread damage. That would hit Toxicroak super effectively, as well as any Terras that may come out. You're probably looking at the spread and asking, Jake, why did you go minus defense and a little bit of special defense? I will explain that. This is the spread. Literally is just hit the first defense boosting benchmark, dump the rest to special defense, get enough speed that I outspeed, I think, Jolly Ursaluna, because that, like, if Ursaluna's outspeeding Como, that would be bad. I can't let that happen. So if these were ever on the field together and Porygon 2 were to come in, I wanted to make sure this is 21 points up in special defense, and this is 20 up in defense, so that way it would force the Porygon 2 to get the attack boost, which is not as good for it. Yeah. Rillaboom, tried and true Assault Vest set, high horsepower fake out, considered U-turn, considered knockoff, but ultimately I need to get rid of Toxicroak. It's a very, very pesky Pokemon for me. It's one of the few things that gets taunt, one of the few things that gets fake out on the team, and those are two things that are really going to help Alec get into his positioning. I added enough speed just that I was one speed faster than Kommo-o, because I don't like my Pokemon being the same speed, and I don't want to reveal how much speed is on each one, so keeping them so close doesn't reveal that information. So version 2 of the team, I was doing damage calcs, and Blastoise couldn't get it done. Blastoise could hardly get one-hit KOs. Like, I was really upset with this thing. Let's look at Ursaluna, right? Known for its solid bulk, but not its special defensive bulk. Mystic Water, Water Spout, a 150 base power move, right? Without the boost, it might not even KO. With the boost, yeah, it does. But if he Terras, it might not. And it could be a Terra that resists it. It could be very specially defensive. Like, the fact that this isn't getting a KO with this much power really bothered me. To a point where I just couldn't invest in Blastoise. It was a risky setup to begin with. And if it wasn't really getting those 1 KOs, I was going to be upset with it. So what changed in version 2? Zoroark, I switched to Bitter Malice over Shadow Ball. While the damage is good, the slight trade-off didn't affect any calcs that I saw, and the attack drop could be very, very useful into something like Toxicroak, into Ogerpon, primarily those two, Ursaluna if it Terras, but I'm probably just going to want to blow it up with another attack. Nonetheless, I think Bitter Malice is an okay thing here. If I give away that I'm Zoroark, I mean, I'm doing that as soon as I click Hyper Voice or Hyper Beam anyways. Como the same, Incineroar the same, Clefable the same, Rillaboom, I think I adjusted the spread a bit. Yeah, I adjusted the spread such that its special defense is higher than its defense, for the same reason I discussed the Blastoise Como thing. That way, if Rillaboom hits the field and it's like by itself, or with Zoroark, or Incineroar, or Clefable, like, I just wanted to be sure that Porygon 2 would get that attack boost and not the special attack boost. Wanted to make sure of that. And last, you can see the change that I made was Metagross. This is the first time I'm running something pretty unconditional, or unorthodox. Unorthodox. So this is a Life Orb Metagross with Heavy Slam and Psychic Fangs only, and Protect and Magnet Rise. Yeah. Magnet Rise is the tech of the week, folks. Magnet Rise tech, Misty Terrain tech. I'm doing it all for this Ursaluna. This Ursaluna is not something I want to deal with. once this thing's off the floor, it's basically a Corviknight, right? It's a Corviknight, it's a Skarmory, it's a Celesteela, more like a Celesteela with this Heavy Slam. And yeah, I ran enough speed such that it would outspeed 107. Suicune and Toxicroak hit 105. So if they were 4 speed, I'll outspeed that. So that is exactly where I went with that. Maxed out its attack, went 1 low on the HP to make sure 169, so it will take 16 recoil instead of 17. Special defense, just make it 12. Defense, make it 151, whatever. Terrifier, because of this little guy right here. I don't want to go Terra Dragon, even though it's a very nice Terra, strictly because of Sylveon. If it's outspeeding me or something, I don't want to deal with that. You may be wondering, wow, Life Orb? Well, yeah. I was curious, like, alright, if Metagross is an Assault Vest, because it's on Rillaboom, what can it be? And how will that affect me, right? So first and foremost, like, let's just look at it. The Facade damage is still very, very strong. Psychic Fang's damage is not doing as much as I'd like. But keep in mind, this is a burned Facade. If it's burned, I can probably pick up the 2-hit KO just by Psychic Fang's Protect, and then another Psychic Fangs, and it'll drop to its burn. If it's not burned, well, it's not doing real damage to me. But the big damage that I wanted to point out was into Porygon 2. Let's go with the defensive set. Life Orb Heavy Slam into a very defensive Porygon 2 is almost able to 2-hit KO, which is crazy. If I'm able to trick it, if I'm able to knock it off, I am in a really good spot to just smash into it with Metagross, and it's going to be forced to be clicking Recover. I want to discuss this week a little more of my worries going into the matchup. As I've discussed, Toxicroak is something that I've had to tech around a lot, just to figure out navigating its state to get me around it and get to Porygon 2, as well as the Pokemon it may be supporting. That's another reason Metagross came, is just because Psychic Fangs, I can click it and blow this thing out of the water. I'd guess that a Heavy Slam can also KO it, depending on its bulk. Yeah. So I can just Heavy Slam. I don't even need to Psychic Fangs, and I should be getting a KO on this Toxicroak. Like, that's incredible. Psychic Fangs just generally does good damage to these Pokemon, though. I could have opted for, I don't know, a fighting move, but I think Psychic Fang's neutral is just fine. I don't expect screens, but she's doing neutral damage into things like Ogerpon, Thundurus, really, really important. So, yeah. There's that. The other thing I'm concerned about is an offensive Thundurus could be a pain. An offensive Ogerpon could be scary, especially because I have Clefable and it has Mold Breaker. A Calm Mind setup Suicune could be a bit scary. But one thing I want to shout is, if this Porygon 2 is anything except Eviolite, no Protect, I might be in trouble. Like, let's say it's Mental Herb. Taunt's out the window, right? Let's say it has Protect. Like, I can't just do my fake-out taunt plans and be done with it. Like, one of my lead plans right now is leading Rillaboom and Incineroar, and if I see Toxicroak plus Porygon 2, there's a toss-up there, right? If it's Covert Cloak on Toxicroak, my fake-out from Rillaboom won't impact it, but its fake-out won't impact me. I'll get the taunt off, and because of Intimidate, a close combat won't KO Incineroar. If it's Clear Amulet, trying to take out Incineroar with close combat, I can just fake it out, and I can taunt the Porygon 2, right? I have those two situations planned out. and I'm not too worried. If it's Choice Band, okay, I lose Incineroar, and then I kick Komodo in with Terra Poison, and I just win the game. So yeah. Hisuian Zoroark disguises to look out for are likely going to be Clefable or Komodo. I'm likely going to lead Incineroar or Rillaboom. It's the ones that don't, immediately declare their abilities that I'm always going to have to be disguising as. If I lead Incineroar or Rillaboom, I cannot put these in the back to disguise. So I have to remember in my head that the 4th slot, if I'm bringing Zoroark, is the most important thing. And yeah. Lastly, I'll go over 2.1 because the fact that I have 2.1 question mark is a little interesting. I was considering Focus Sash Zoroark with Psychic. Psychic, again, to take out the pesky Toxicroak immediately. And Focus Sash, just generally survive things. Trick would still be great to take off an item. It actually gets knockoff, so I don't know why I didn't just go with that. But yeah, I could have just gone with a knockoff instead of Trick. Either way, Focus Sash would have been good if I did not see that Hisuian Zoroark can almost nuke Porygon 2 off of the Earth with, like, Terra Stellar Hyper Beam. If I just click Hyper Beam and then another move into Porygon 2, it's probably dropping. If I click Terra Stellar Hyper Beam plus, like, Incineroar knockoff plus, like, anything, Porygon 2's gone. If Toxicroak doesn't lead into it, or if Ogerpon Hearthflame doesn't lead into it. Yeah. That's another reason I'm considering the lead of Incin and Rilla, is just because I can fake out Taunt and I'm pretty set. I think that goes over my worries. The team I expect is 1 Ogerpon, 2 Porygon 2, 3 Ursaluna, 4 Sylveon, 5 Toxicroak, and then 6 I would say is a toss-up between Suicune and Thundurus. I could see Tyranitar coming, possibly. I could see Orthworm coming, possibly. I don't see a world where Noctowl or Cacturne come. Which one would be more scary for me? I'd probably have to say Thundurus, just because its typing is way more annoying to deal with. And Prankster's just a pain in the butt. I can easily get hacked out by that. If I'm Alec, I'm probably identifying that I would be bringing 1, 2, 3, 4, the Rillaboom, the Incineroar, the Metagross, and the Komodo. Maybe not even the Metagross, but Clefable, Rillaboom, Incineroar, Komodo, and then the rest of my 2 are toss-ups. I think he will expect me not to bring Volcarona, but, I very well could. Zoroark is certainly an option. I think he might think I'll bring Rhydon, and I did consider Rhydon with Iron Defense Body Press, because it can fill a similar role to Komodo, while being slower than Ursaluna in Trick Room, but ultimately decided not to. It just doesn't have the special defense to deal with the rest of the team throwing out special attacks, so I didn't go for that. Any items I didn't mention? Leftovers on Komodo. That's it. Leftovers on Komodo with Grassy Terrain. I'm real original, guys. So yeah, that's it. Here's the team on a Pokepaste. And yeah, hopefully this goes well. If I win this, I stay undefeated in the league and am the last person undefeated after week 3. But we'll see how that goes in a bit. Bye.